The millionaire is shocked to see the maid, who looks exactly like his deceased girlfriend, wearing a necklace. The morning sun bathed the imposing gates of the Thompson estate with a golden light, promising a day full of possibilities. Emily Parker, a 22-year-old young woman with wavy brown hair and honey-colored eyes, took a deep breath, nervously adjusting the strap of her bag on her shoulder. Her heart was racing, mixing anxiety and expectation as she prepared to start her first day of work as a maid in the luxurious residence. The mansion, a majestic neoclassical building, stood imposingly before her, its tall windows reflecting the blue sky of Boston. The meticulously manicured gardens surrounding the property seemed straight out of a fairy tale, with roses of all colors and marble fountains that gently bubbled. Emily pressed the intercom button, her voice trembling slightly as she identified herself. Seconds later, the gates opened with an electric buzz inviting her in. She walked along the stone path, absorbing every detail of the environment that would be her new workplace. As she approached the main entrance, the door opened, revealing a middle-aged woman with a warm smile. "Welcome, Emily. I'm Mrs. Thompson, the housekeeper. Please come in." Emily returned the smile, feeling a little more relaxed with the friendly reception. She followed Mrs. Thompson into the mansion, her eyes widening at the opulence of the interior. Crystal chandeliers hung from high ceilings, artwork adorned the walls, and carefully preserved antique furniture filled the spaces. "Mr. Thompson is in a meeting at the moment, but he asked me to show you around the house and explain your tasks," said Mrs. Thompson, guiding Emily through a wide corridor. As they toured the mansion, Emily absorbed every detail, from the imposing library with floor-to-ceiling shelves to the ultra-modern kitchen equipped with the most advanced appliances. Mrs. Thompson patiently explained Emily's responsibilities, which included cleaning specific areas of the house, assisting in organizing events, and occasionally serving meals when there were guests. "And here's the master bedroom," said Mrs. Thompson, stopping in front of an intricately carved oak door. "Mr. Thompson is very private about this space, so you'll only enter here when he specifically requests it." Emily nodded, making a mental note. Throughout the tour, she couldn't help but notice the absence of family photos or any personal touch in the decor. The mansion, despite its beauty, seemed strangely cold and impersonal. When they returned to the entrance hall, the front door opened, and Emily saw for the first time the man who would be her employer. Jack Thompson was an imposing figure, with his well-lived 45 years evident in every feature of his face. Grey hair at his temples added an air of distinction, while his piercing green eyes seemed capable of reading anyone's soul. Jack stopped abruptly upon seeing Emily, his eyes widening for a moment before narrowing in intense curiosity. "You must be the new maid," he said, his deep voice echoing through the hall. Emily felt a shiver run down her spine, not understanding why the intensity of Jack's gaze affected her so much. "Yes, sir. I'm Emily Parker. It's a pleasure to meet you." Jack continued to observe her for a few more seconds before nodding briefly. "Welcome to Thompson Estate, Emily. I hope you adapt well here." With that, he turned and climbed the stairs, leaving Emily with a strange sense of déjà vu that she couldn't explain. "Mrs. Thompson softly cleared her throat, bringing Emily back to reality. "Well, dear, I think we've seen everything. How about we start with your tasks?" Emily agreed, eager to dive into work and push away the unsettling feeling that the encounter with Jack had left. As she followed Mrs. Thompson to begin her activities, she couldn't help but notice the crescent moon-shaped necklace she wore, a gift from her mother that had always brought her comfort. Unbeknownst to her, that small object would be the catalyst for events that would change her life forever. The following weeks passed in a blur of new routines and discoveries for Emily. She quickly adapted to her responsibilities, impressing Mrs. Thompson with her efficiency and attention to detail. The mansion, which initially seemed like an intimidating labyrinth, gradually became familiar. However, there was something that continued to intrigue Emily: Jack Thompson's behavior. She often caught him observing her with an expression that mixed curiosity and something that seemed almost pain. These brief and strange interactions left Emily confused and, for some inexplicable reason, with her heart racing. One afternoon, while Emily was cleaning the library, Jack unexpectedly entered. He stopped at the door, his eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made Emily freeze in place. "Excuse me, Mr. Thompson," she said, quickly composing herself. "I was just leaving." "No," Jack replied, his voice soft but firm. "Please stay. I would like to talk to you if you don't mind." Emily nodded, suddenly feeling nervous. Jack walked to one of the leather armchairs, gesturing for her to sit in the other. "Emily," he began, his eyes never leaving hers, "there's something about you that has intrigued me since the moment I saw you. You remind me very much of someone I knew a long time ago." Emily's heart raced. "I do, sir." Jack nodded slowly. "Yes, a woman who meant a lot to me. Her name was Sarah." Emily felt a wave of shock run through her body. Sarah was her mother's name. What happened to her?" Emily asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Jack's eyes filled with deep sadness. "She died, or at least that's what I was told, more than 20 years ago." Emily struggled to maintain her composure, her mind spinning with the implications of what she was hearing. She unconsciously touched the crescent moon necklace on her neck, a gesture that didn't go unnoticed by Jack. His eyes widened at the sight of the necklace. "That necklace," he said, his voice trembling. "Where did you get it?" "It was a gift from my mother," Emily replied, feeling as if the ground was disappearing beneath her feet. Jack abruptly stood up, walking to the window. When he turned, his eyes shimmered with unshed tears. "Emily, how old are you?" 22, she answered, her voice barely audible. The silence that followed was deafening. Jack closed his eyes, taking a deep breath before speaking again. "Emily, there's something we need to investigate, something that could change our lives forever." And so, on that sunny afternoon in the library of Thompson Estate, Emily felt she was about to embark on a journey that would reveal long-buried secrets and redraw the contours of her own identity. The days that followed the conversation in the library were a whirlwind of emotions for Emily. She continued her tasks in the mansion, but her mind was constantly filled with unanswered questions. Jack, for his part, seemed to be on a silent mission, often locked in his office, making calls in a low voice and examining old documents. A week later, on a Sunday afternoon, Jack called Emily to his office. When she entered, she immediately noticed the change in the atmosphere of the room. Papers were scattered on the mahogany desk, and Jack had deep dark circles under his eyes, evidence of sleepless nights. "Emily," he began, his voice laden with emotion, "I've spent the last few days investigating, and what I've discovered, well, it's something that will change everything." He paused as if gathering courage before continuing. "I believe you are my daughter." The words hit Emily like lightning. She felt her legs weaken and had to lean on the nearest chair. How is that possible?" she managed to stammer. Jack sighed deeply. 23 years ago, I was in love with a woman named Sarah. We were young, full of dreams, but one day suddenly she disappeared. Weeks later I received news that she had died in an accident." He paused, his eyes filling with tears. "I never knew she was pregnant. Emily, your mother, she's alive, isn't she?" Emily nodded slowly, still in shock. "Yes, she is. But she never mentioned you. She told me my father had died before I was born." Jack ran his hand over his face, trying to process the information. "There are so many questions, so many lost years. Emily, I know this is a shock to you, but I'd like to do a DNA test, to be sure." Emily silently agreed. Her head was spinning with the implications of everything she was hearing. If this was true, it meant that her entire life had been built on a lie. Why would her mother have hidden this from her? Why pretend that Jack was dead? In the days that followed, Emily found herself in an emotional limbo. She continued her tasks in the mansion, but every glance exchanged with Jack was loaded with new meaning. When the DNA test results finally arrived, confirming what Jack already suspected, it was as if an emotional earthquake had shaken the foundations of Emily's life. "I always felt there was something missing in my life," Jack confessed to her one night as they sat on the mansion's porch watching the sunset. "Now I know what it was. It was you, Emily. My daughter." Emily felt hot tears running down her cheeks. "I have so many questions," she said, her voice choked. "Why did my mother hide this from us? Why did she fake your death?" Jack shook his head slowly. "I don't know, dear. But I promise you we'll find out. Together." It was at that moment that Emily made a decision. "We need to go to my hometown. We need to talk to my mother." Jack immediately agreed. "Yes, let's go. It's time to unearth the truth, no matter how painful it may be." As they made preparations for the trip, Emily couldn't help but reflect on how drastically her life had changed in such a short time. From a simple maid, she now saw herself as the heiress to a fortune, daughter of a man she barely knew, but who already demonstrated unconditional love for her. The journey to the small town in upstate New York where Emily grew up was silent and tense. Jack drove, his eyes fixed on the road, while Emily watched the landscape change through the window, her heart beating faster as they approached their destination. When they finally arrived at the modest two-story house where Emily had spent her childhood, she felt as if she was about to wake up from a long and confusing dream. Sarah opened the door, her warm, welcoming smile freezing on her face when she saw Jack beside her daughter. Her face paled and she leaned on the doorframe to keep from falling. "Jack," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Hello, Sarah," Jack replied, his voice a mixture of emotions, anger, sadness, love. "I think we have a lot to talk about." Sarah looked from Jack to Emily, tears beginning to form in her eyes. "Come in," she finally said, her voice trembling. "You deserve explanations." As they entered the simple but cozy living room, Emily felt the weight of 2 decades of secrets hanging over them. She knew that the next few hours would change her life forever, revealing long-buried truths and perhaps offering a chance for healing wounds she didn't even know existed. The silence in the small living room was almost palpable. Sarah sat in a worn armchair, her hands trembling slightly as she looked at Jack and Emily, who occupied the couch in front of her. The ticking of the old wall clock seemed deafening in the tense silence that filled the room. I don't even know where to start," Sarah finally said, her voice almost a whisper. Jack leaned forward, his eyes fixed on Sarah. "How about from the beginning? Why did you fake your death, Sarah? Why did you keep me away from my daughter all these years?" Emily watched her mother with a mixture of confusion and hurt. "Mom, please." "We need to understand." Sarah took a deep breath, closing her eyes for a moment before beginning her story. "It all started 23 years ago when I found out I was pregnant. I was so happy, so eager to tell you, Jack. But before I could do it, my father, Robert, intercepted one of your letters." She paused, remembering that fateful day. "My father had always been a controlling man, obsessive about social status. When he discovered the pregnancy, he was furious. He thought that you, Jack, a young businessman still building your empire, wouldn't be able to give us the life he thought we deserved." Jack frowned, anger evident in his voice. "And that gave him the right to decide for us." Sarah shook her head, tears running down her cheeks. "No, of course not. But my father, he was relentless. He threatened to destroy your career, Jack. He said he would use his contacts to ruin your business if I didn't agree to disappear." Emily felt her heart tighten as she listened to her mother's story. "But why fake your death? Why not just leave?" "What?" Sarah looked at her daughter, remorse evident in her eyes. "My father thought that if Jack believed I was dead, he would move on. He wouldn't look for us. And I was scared, confused, pregnant, and not knowing what to do. I ended up giving in to my father's manipulations." Jack abruptly stood up, walking to the window. When he turned, his eyes shimmered with unshed tears. "You didn't trust me enough to tell me the truth, for us to fight against your father together," Sarah sobbed. "I was young and foolish, Jack. I thought I was protecting you and our daughter. I only realized the mistake I had made when it was too late." Emily, feeling the weight of the revelations, asked with a trembling voice, "And after I was born, why didn't you look for Jack then?" Sarah wiped the tears with the back of her hand. "The shame, the fear, they paralyzed me. And over time the lie grew so big that I didn't know how to undo it anymore. So I raised you the best I could, Emily, trying to make up for your father's absence with all the love I had." Jack sat back down, his expression a mixture of pain and compassion. "And your father, Sarah? Where is he now?" Sarah lowered her eyes. "Dad, he still lives here in town. He's sick now, bedridden. The last few years haven't been easy for him. The weight of what he did, I think it consumed him from the inside." A heavy silence fell over the room as everyone processed the revelations. Emily looked from her mother to Jack, trying to reconcile this new reality with everything she believed she knew about her life. Finally, Jack spoke, his voice laden with emotion. "Sarah, what your father did, what you did, robbed me of precious years with my daughter, years I can never get back." Sarah nodded, unable to contain her tears. I know, Jack, and I'll spend the rest of my life regretting and trying to fix this if you'll let me. Emily, feeling the weight of the moment, stood up and walked to her mother, holding her hands. Mom, I don't fully understand yet, but I know you love me and I know you did what you thought was best at the time. Jack watched the interaction between mother and daughter, his heart filling with a complex mixture of emotions. He approached, placing a hand on Emily's shoulder. We can't change the past, he said softly, but maybe we can build a future together. All of us. Sarah looked at Jack, hope shining in her eyes. You really think that's possible? After everything? Jack took a deep breath. It won't be easy. There's a lot of hurt, a lot of pain. But for Emily, for our daughter, I think it's worth trying. Emily felt a wave of emotion envelop her. There in that small room was her family, broken, imperfect, but finally complete. And for the first time in her life, she felt she truly belonged somewhere. I want this, she said, looking from her mother to her newly discovered father. I want us to be a family. Sarah and Jack exchanged a look, years of lost love and unrealized possibilities passing between them. Then let's try, Jack finally said, one day at a time. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow through the window, the three remained together, united by love, forgiveness, and the promise of a new beginning. The journey ahead would be difficult, full of painful conversations and adjustments, but at that moment there was hope. Hope that the secrets of the past could give way to a future full of love and understanding. The days that followed the revelation were an emotional roller coaster for everyone involved. Emily oscillated between the joy of having finally met her father and confusion about how to feel towards her mother. Jack, in turn, struggled to balance years of hurt with the ardent desire to build a relationship with his newly discovered daughter. Sarah watched everything with a mixture of relief for finally having told the truth and anxiety about the uncertain future that awaited them. The tension in the air was palpable, but there was also a sense of possibility, a chance to heal old wounds and form new bonds. One afternoon, as they walked through the garden of Sarah's small house, Jack finally expressed the thought that had been hammering in his mind. Emily, he began hesitantly, I know this might seem rushed, but I'd like you and your mother to come live in the mansion with me. Emily stopped, surprised by the proposal. Live with you in the mansion? Jack nodded, his eyes full of hope. Yes, I know it's a big change, but I think it could give us a chance to really get to know each other, to be a family. Emily looked at her mother, who was a few steps behind, giving them space to talk. And you, Mom? What do you think about this? Sarah approached, a sad smile on her lips. I think it's a wonderful opportunity for you, dear, to get to know your father, to have the life you always deserved. But what about you? Emily insisted, noticing the hesitation in her voice. Sarah exchanged a look with Jack before answering. I don't know if I have the right to accept such an offer after everything I've done. Jack surprised both of them by extending his hand to Sarah. Sarah, I know we still have a lot to work out between us, but you're the mother of my daughter, and despite everything, you raised her wonderfully well. I'd like you to come too. Tears shimmered in Sarah's eyes. Jack, I don't know what to say. Say yes, Emily intervened, holding both their hands. Let's try together. After a moment of emotion-laden silence, Sarah slowly nodded. All right, let's try. The following weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Packing up a lifetime, saying goodbye to neighbors and friends, preparing for a new reality. For Emily, it was surreal to see the room she had occupied as a maid being transformed into her own personal space, decorated with her things and childhood memories. Adaptation wasn't easy. There were moments of tension, difficult conversations, and tears shed. Jack and Sarah had to navigate years of unresolved feelings, while Emily tried to find her place in this new family dynamic. One night, about a month after the move, Emily found Jack in his office, looking pensively at an old photograph. Dad? She called softly, still getting used to the word. Jack looked up, a smile forming on his face. Hi, sweetie. Come in. Emily approached, curious about the photo he was holding. It was an image of Jack and Sarah, young and smiling, clearly in love. "You look so happy," Emily commented. Jack nodded, a mixture of nostalgia and sadness in his eyes. "We were. Your grandfather, he didn't understand what we had." Emily hesitated before asking the question that had been on her mind for weeks. "Dad, do you think there's still a chance for you and Mom?" Jack was silent for a long moment. "I don't know, Emily. There's still a lot of love there, but also a lot of pain, a lot of broken trust." "But you're trying, aren't you?" Emily insisted, hope in her voice. Jack smiled softly. "Yes, we're trying, for you mainly, but also for ourselves, I think." At that moment, Sarah appeared at the office door. "Excuse me, I didn't mean to interrupt," she said, starting to step away. "No, stay," Jack said, surprising himself and the two women. "Actually, I was thinking maybe we could have dinner out tonight. Just the three of us." Emily's face lit up with a radiant smile. "That would be wonderful." Sarah hesitated for a moment before agreeing with a shy smile. "I'd like that very much." As they prepared to leave, Emily couldn't help but feel a wave of hope. It was a small step but significant. Her family, fragmented for so long, was slowly coming together again. The dinner was a mixture of awkward moments and genuine laughter. Stories were shared, memories relived, and new connections formed. And when Jack reached across the table to hold Sarah's hand, Emily felt her heart fill with joy. Maybe, she thought, watching her parents exchange an emotion-laden look, love really could overcome everything. Maybe, with time, patience, and forgiveness, they could really become the family they should have always been. As the days turned into weeks and weeks into months, life at Thompson Estate found a new rhythm. Emily, Jack, and Sarah were slowly learning to navigate their new family dynamic. There were moments of genuine joy, interspersed with periods of adjustment and occasionally tension. One Saturday morning, as they were having breakfast on the terrace overlooking the lush gardens, Emily noticed a shadow pass over her mother's face. "Mom, is everything okay?" she asked, concerned. Sarah forced a smile, but her eyes betrayed her unease. "Yes, dear. I'm just thinking about your grandfather." Jack, who was reading the newspaper, slowly lowered it, his expression becoming serious. "Robert? What about him?" Sarah sighed, placing her teacup on the table. "I received a call last night. He's not doing well. The doctors, they say he doesn't have much time left." A heavy silence fell over the terrace. Emily looked from her mother to her father, uncertain about how to react. She barely knew her grandfather, having grown up hearing only vague mentions of him. Jack broke the silence, his voice controlled, but with a hint of bitterness. "And what do you want to do about it, Sarah?" Sarah met Jack's eyes, a silent plea in her gaze. "I know it's asking a lot after everything he did, but he's my father and Emily's grandfather. I'd like to see him, to give Emily a chance to meet him before it's too late." Emily felt her heart tighten. The man she had never really known, the architect of so much suffering in her family, was dying. And yet, he was her grandfather. Jack remained silent for a long moment, clearly struggling with conflicting emotions. Finally he spoke, his voice soft but firm. "If that's what you want, I won't stop you. But I can't promise I'll go along. Robert, he stole precious years from me. From us." Sarah nodded, understanding the pain in his words. "I understand, Jack, and I appreciate your understanding." Emily, feeling the weight of the moment, decided to intervene. "I'd like to go," she said, surprising both of them. "I want to meet my grandfather, understand why he did what he did." Jack looked at his daughter, a mixture of pride and concern in his eyes. "Are you sure, sweetie? I don't want you to get hurt." Emily smiled softly. "I'm sure. I think it's important for all of us to have closure." In the days that followed, preparations for the trip were made. The tension was palpable in the mansion, with Jack alternating between moments of understanding and others of clear frustration. On the eve of departure, he surprised everyone by announcing he would go along. "I can't promise I'll be cordial," he told Sarah privately. "But you're right. Emily deserves to know all parts of her story, even the most painful ones." The trip back to the small upstate town was silent, each lost in their own thoughts. When they arrived at the modest house where Robert was being cared for, Emily felt her heart race. As they entered the dimly lit room, Robert's frailty was immediately apparent. The man who had once been so powerful and controlling now looked small and fragile in his improvised hospital bed. His eyes opened slowly at the sound of footsteps, and a mixture of emotions crossed his wrinkled face when he saw who had arrived. "Sarah," he whispered, his voice weak. "And it can't be Emily?" Emily approached the bed, feeling a strange mixture of compassion and resentment. "Hello, Grandpa," she said softly. Robert's eyes filled with tears. "You look so much like your mother," he murmured. Then his gaze fixed on Jack, who remained at the door, tense. "And Jack, you came." Jack stepped forward, his expression a mask of control. "I came for Emily and Sarah." Robert closed his eyes for a moment, as if gathering strength. When he reopened them, there was deep sadness in them. "I know nothing I say can fix what I did," he began, his voice trembling. "But I need you to understand I thought I was protecting my daughter, my granddaughter." Jack stepped forward, the anger evident in his contained voice. "Protecting them by separating a family? Lying to all of us for years?" Robert weakly shook his head. "I was wrong, so terribly wrong. Fear, pride, they blinded me. And I've spent every day since then regretting it." Sarah approached the bed, holding her father's hand. "Why, Dad? Why didn't you tell us the truth afterwards?" Robert coughed, his breathing labored. "Shame. Fear. The lie grew so big that I didn't know how to undo it anymore. And then it was too late." Emily, feeling the intensity of the moment, stepped forward. "Grandpa, I don't know you. I don't know if I can fully forgive what you did. But I'm here now. We're all here." Robert's eyes filled with tears again. "My dear granddaughter, you have your mother's heart and your father's strength." He looked at Jack. "Jack, I know I have no right to ask for your forgiveness, but I need you to know. Sarah never stopped loving you, and I'm sorry. More than words can express." Jack remained silent for a long moment, the conflict evident on his face. Finally he spoke, his voice hoarse with contained emotion. "Robert, what you did cost us years we can never get back. But being here, seeing you like this, I can't say I forgive you completely, but I understand that you too have suffered from your choices." The relief on Robert's face was palpable. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you for coming, for giving me this chance to see you, all of you, together." As the afternoon progressed, stories were shared, tears were shed, and slowly a deeper understanding began to form among them all. It wasn't complete forgiveness nor total acceptance, but it was a start. When they finally left Robert's room hours later, there was a feeling that something had changed. A page had been turned, allowing a new chapter to begin. On the trip back to the mansion, the silence in the car was different. It was no longer laden with tension, but with reflection. Emily, sitting in the back seat, watched her parents in front. At one point, she saw Jack reach out and gently hold Sarah's hand. It was then that Emily realized, sometimes forgiveness doesn't come in grand, dramatic gestures. Sometimes it comes in small moments of understanding, in hands held and shared silences, and maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something truly new for her newly reunited family. In the months that followed Robert's visit, a subtle but significant change began to manifest in the Thompson family dynamics. The weight of secrets kept for so long seemed to have been lifted, allowing everyone to breathe a little more freely. Emily, now more comfortable in her role as Jack's daughter and heiress to the Thompson fortune, began to get more involved in the family business. Jack, seeing his daughter's interest and natural aptitude, began to guide her, sharing the secrets of his business success. One afternoon, as they were reviewing some contracts in Jack's office, Emily noticed a glimmer of pride in her father's eyes. "What is it?" she asked, curious. Jack smiled, shaking his head slightly. "Nothing. It's just that you remind me a lot of myself when I was your age, full of ideas, of ambition." Emily felt her heart warm with the compliment. "Thank you, Dad. That means a lot to me." Jack hesitated for a moment before continuing. "You know, Emily, I was thinking, maybe it's time for you to take a more active role in the company. How would you feel about becoming my executive assistant?" Emily's eyes widened in surprise. "Really? You think I'm ready? Jack nodded, confident. More than ready. You have a natural talent for business, Emily, and besides, I want to make up for lost time. I want to teach you everything I know. Tears of happiness shimmered in Emily's eyes as she hugged her father. Thank you, Dad. I won't let you down. Meanwhile, Sarah was finding her own place in the mansion. Initially hesitant to make changes, she gradually began to add her personal touch to the decor, transforming the cold and impersonal house into a welcoming home. One evening, Jack found her rearranging some photos in the living room. Among them was the old photograph of the two of them, young and in love, which he used to keep hidden in his office. I thought it would be nice to have some happy memories around here, Sarah explained, noticing Jack's surprised look. Jack approached, picking up the photo. A nostalgic smile formed on his lips. We were so young, he murmured. Sarah nodded, her eyes meeting Jack's, and so in love. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. The tension between them, which had been gradually diminishing over the past few months, suddenly seemed almost palpable. Jack stepped forward, his voice low and intense. Sarah, But before he could continue, Emily entered the room, excited to share the news about her new position in the company. The moment broke, but something had changed. A spark had been rekindled. In the weeks that followed, Emily noticed a subtle change in the interaction between her parents. There were more shared smiles, casual touches that lasted a little longer than necessary, looks that said more than words could express. One night during dinner, Jack cleared his throat, seeming nervous. I'd like to make an announcement, he began. Emily and Sarah looked at him, curious. Sarah, he continued, turning to her, we've been through a lot, we've lost so much time. But these last few months, well, they've made me realize something. Sarah held her breath, her eyes fixed on Jack. I never stopped loving you, Jack confessed, his voice choked with emotion. And if you're willing, I'd like to try again, properly this time. Tears shimmered in Sarah's eyes. Oh, Jack, I never stopped loving you either. Emily watched the scene, her heart overflowing with happiness. When her parents kissed for the first time in over 2 decades, she couldn't contain a sob of joy. Jack and Sarah turned to their daughter, radiant smiles on their faces. Come here, Jack called, extending his arm. Emily didn't hesitate, joining the family hug. There, wrapped in her parents' arms, she felt that she was finally complete. The family she had always dreamed of but never knew she could have, was finally united. In the months that followed, Thompson Estate was the stage for a transformation. What was once a cold and impersonal house became a home full of love and laughter. Jack and Sarah rediscovered their love, this time stronger and more mature. Emily flourished in her new role in the company, bringing fresh and innovative ideas that impressed even the most skeptical executives. And on a starry night exactly 1 year after the revelation that changed their lives, Jack surprised everyone with a special request. Kneeling before Sarah in the mansion's garden, with Emily as an emotional witness, he presented a ring. Sarah, he began, his voice trembling slightly. 23 years ago, I lost the chance to do this, but fate has given us a second chance. Would you do me the honor of marrying me, of making official what should have always been? With tears of happiness running down her face, Sarah responded with an emotional yes. As her parents embraced, Emily felt a wave of gratitude wash over her. Her journey had been long and at times painful, but there, in that perfect moment, she knew that every challenge, every tear shed had been worth it. The full moon shone in the sky, reminding Emily of the necklace her mother had given her so many years ago. That symbol of love and connection that, unbeknownst to her, had been the key to reuniting her family. The future opened up before them, full of promises and possibilities, and Emily knew that no matter what came, they would face it together, as a family, as it always should have been. The months leading up to Jack and Sarah's wedding were a whirlwind of activities. Thompson Estate, once a symbol of loneliness and secrets, now buzzed with the energy of a reunited family and the preparations for the celebration of rediscovered love. Emily threw herself headfirst into the preparations, determined to make the day special for her parents. Between meetings at the company and choices of flowers and decorations, she barely had time to breathe. but every moment of tiredness was rewarded by the radiant smiles of Jack and Sarah. One afternoon, while Emily was reviewing some wedding details with the planner, Jack entered her office, a thoughtful expression on his face. "Emily, dear, do you have a moment?" he asked. Emily nodded, curious. "Of course, Dad, what is it?" Jack sat down, looking a bit nervous. "I've been thinking about the future of the company." Emily felt her heart race. Since taking on the role of executive assistant, she had been working tirelessly to prove her worth. "What about it?" she asked, trying to keep her voice calm. Jack smiled, pride evident in his eyes. "You've been doing an amazing job, Emily. You've brought new ideas, a fresh perspective. And I think it's time we start thinking about your succession." Emily felt the air escape from her lungs. "Succession? Dad, you're not thinking about retiring, are you?" Ed softly. "Not immediately, no. But I want to start preparing the ground. You are the future of this company, Emily, and I want to make sure you're ready to take over when the time comes." Tears of emotion shimmered in Emily's eyes. "Dad, I don't know what to say. It's such a huge honor." Jack stood up, walking around the desk to hug his daughter. "You deserve it, sweetheart. You've worked hard and proven your worth. I'm so proud of you." At that moment, Sarah entered the office, smiling as she saw the emotional embrace between father and daughter. "Am I interrupting something?" she asked softly. Emily turned, a radiant smile on her face. "Mom, Dad just told me he wants to start preparing me to take over the company in the future." Sarah hugged her daughter, sharing her joy. "Oh, darling, that's wonderful. You deserve this." As the family celebrated this new phase, wedding preparations continued at full speed. The big day finally arrived, transforming the gardens of Thompson Estate into a fairy tale setting. Emily, dressed in an elegant bridesmaid dress, helped Sarah with the final details of her wedding dress. "Mom," she said softly, "you look beautiful." Sarah smiled, tears of happiness shining in her eyes. "Oh, Emily, sometimes I pinch myself to make sure I'm not dreaming. Having you and your father back in my life, it's more than I ever dared to hope for." Emily hugged her mother carefully so as not to wrinkle the dress. "You both deserve all this happiness, Mum. After everything you've been through." The sound of soft music began to play, signaling the start of the ceremony. Emily gave her mother one last hug before taking her place in the aisle. When Sarah began her walk to the altar, where Jack waited with a radiant smile, there wasn't a dry eye among the guests. Their love story, interrupted for so many years, was finally reaching its pinnacle. Emily watched, her heart overflowing with joy as her parents exchanged vows and rings. When the celebrant declared them husband and wife, the gardens erupted in applause and cheers. During the reception, as guests danced and celebrated, Emily found a moment of quiet. She stepped away a bit, observing the scene with a smile on her lips. "Is everything okay, sweetie?" Jack's voice surprised her. Emily turned, smiling at her father. "Everything's perfect, Dad. I'm just absorbing all of this." Jack put an arm around his daughter's shoulders. "You know, a few years ago, I never would have imagined I could be this happy. Having you and your mother back in my life, it's a miracle." "A miracle that started with a crescent moon necklace," Emily joked, touching the pendant she still wore. Jack laughed softly. "Yes, that necklace. Who would have thought that a simple object could change our lives so profoundly?" Sarah joined them, radiant in her wedding dress. "What are you two laughing about?" "Just remembering how it all began," Emily replied, hugging her mother. The three stood there for a moment, embracing, watching the party that celebrated not only Jack and Sarah's wedding, but also the reunion of a family that had been separated for so long. As the night progressed, Emily couldn't help but think about the future. With the prospect of taking over the company one day, she knew she had big challenges ahead. But looking at her parents, seeing the love and happiness on their faces, she knew she could face anything. Fate had given them a second chance, and they had made the most of it. Now, with the love and support of her family, Emily was ready to write the next chapter of her story. A story of love, forgiveness, and new beginnings. As the full moon rose in the night sky, bathing the gardens in its silver light, Emily made a silent wish that the love that united her family would continue to shine as brightly as that moon, illuminating their paths for many years to come. The years that followed Jack and Sarah's wedding were ones of growth, both for the Thompson family and for the business. Emily, now 30, had become a respected executive, bringing a new era of innovation and social responsibility to the company. On a sunny spring morning, 5 years after her parents' wedding, Emily was in her office at the company reviewing some reports when she received an unexpected call. "Miss Thompson," her assistant's voice sounded over the intercom, "there's a young man here wanting to speak with you. He says it's about a charity project." Intrigued, Emily asked for the visitor to be sent in. Moments later, a tall man with intense green eyes and a captivating smile entered her office. "Miss Thompson," he greeted, extending his hand, "I'm Nathan Carter. Thank you so much for seeing me." Emily felt a slight tremor as she shook Nathan's hand, surprised by the intensity of his presence. "The pleasure is mine, Mr. Carter. How can I help you?" Nathan began to explain about an education project for underprivileged children that he was developing. His passion for the subject was contagious, and Emily found herself increasingly involved in the conversation. After almost an hour of animated discussion, Emily made a decision. "Mr. Carter, your project is exactly the kind of initiative we're looking to support. Would you like to schedule a meeting with our social responsibility team to discuss a partnership?" Nathan's smile lit up his entire face. "That would be amazing, Miss Thompson. Thank you so much." When Nathan left the office, Emily found herself smiling to herself. There was something about him, an energy and a commitment, that intrigued her. In the weeks that followed, Emily and Nathan worked together on the education project. Long hours of planning and passionate discussions brought them closer, and it soon became clear that there was more than just professional interest between them. At a family dinner at Thompson Estate, Emily finally gathered the courage to tell her parents about Nathan. "Mom, Dad," she began, nervous, "there's someone special in my life. His name is Nathan and, well, I think I'm in love." Jack and Sarah exchanged a knowing look before smiling at their daughter. "Oh, darling," Sarah said, holding Emily's hand, "we've noticed the change in you over the past few weeks. Your eyes have been shining in a way we've never seen before." Jack nodded, a warm smile on his face. "We're happy for you, Emily, and we can't wait to meet this Nathan." Relief and happiness flooded Emily. Her parents' support meant the world to her. In the months that followed, Nathan became a constant presence in the Thompsons' lives. His dedication to the education project and his genuine love for Emily made him beloved by the entire family. On a starry night, exactly 1 year after their first meeting, Nathan took Emily for a walk in the gardens of Thompson Estate. Stopping under the same tree where Jack had proposed to Sarah years before, Nathan knelt down. "Emily," he began, his voice trembling with emotion, "you've brought light and love into my life in a way I never imagined possible. You inspire me every day with your strength, your compassion, and your determination. Would you do me the honor of marrying me?" With tears of happiness in her eyes, Emily responded with an emotional yes. Emily and Nathan's wedding was a celebration of love and new life. Thompson Estate once again filled with flowers, music, and laughter. During the ceremony, Emily wore the crescent moon necklace that had been the catalyst for her entire journey. When it came time to exchange rings, she surprised everyone by taking off the necklace. "This necklace," she said, her voice choked with emotion, "represented the beginning of a new phase in my life. It brought me back to my parents, gave me a family. Now I want it to represent the beginning of our life together, Nathan." With that, she placed the necklace around Nathan's neck, who received it with tears in his eyes. Jack and Sarah watched the scene, hand in hand, their hearts overflowing with joy at seeing their daughter so happy. As Emily and Nathan shared their first kiss as husband and wife, Jack leaned in to whisper in Sarah's ear, "Who would have thought that that necklace I gave you so many years ago would bring us here?" Sarah smiled, tears of happiness in her eyes. Love always finds a way, doesn't it? And there, under the starry sky with the moon shining brightly above them, the Thompson family celebrated not just a new marriage, but the enduring power of love, forgiveness, and family. Emily looked around, her heart overflowing with gratitude. Her journey had been long and at times painful, but every challenge, every tear shed, had led to this perfect moment. The future opened up before them, full of promises and possibilities, and Emily knew that no matter what came, they would face it together. as a family, a legacy of love that would continue to shine as brightly as the moon in the sky, illuminating the paths of generations to come.